What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, and this is your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, analysis, and so much more. Today, this video is going to be a little different than our normal videos. Normally, we do these recaps of the game. We talk about various talking points from the most recent game, but today we're not really going to be doing that. For one, Morgan's not here, so I'm going to take a little bit of creative liberty and do something a little different, and that's kind of address some of the biggest talking points to come out from last night's game, because I think while a lot of us are riding high from the Lions being able to get their get back against the San Francisco 49ers in a 40-34 win in San Francisco, there's a lot more hype and there's a lot more buzz going around about what this team is going to need to do in order to not just beat Minnesota next week and clinch the division and get the #1 seed, but can this team continue to go forward and continue to push for a Super Bowl? Like, how much danger is this team really in, considering how poorly the defense is playing at this point? So with that said, there are two things that I specifically want to talk about in this video. The first is addressing the offense, because there are a lot of people that are wondering, can this offense continue to play at this level, and can the Lions win playing this style of football? So we definitely want to talk about that part. The second part is, even though the defense is playing so poorly, what is the other reason outside of the offense of why I at least believe that the Lions can still make a strong push to not just clinch this division in the #1 seed, but also make a very, very deep run in the playoffs and potentially even get to the Super Bowl? There's one thing specifically that I look at least gives me that level of confidence. But before we jump into those two questions, I do want to at least touch on yesterday's game, because there were a number of great performances on both the offensive and defensive side, as shady as the defense looked at times. First and foremost, Jared Goff once again had a fantastic game, going 26 of 34 for 303 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Just a really good, efficient day. I don't think there's been a number of games this season where Jared has looked really, really good. This is one of those that's going to be high on the list. Like, he never once looked rattled, even despite getting sacked twice. Never, made that costly mistake that put the team behind the 8 ball, and continue to play at a really high level. Next, we obviously got to talk about Jahmyr Gibbs, who has continued to carry the load for this rushing attack ever since David Montgomery went down. 18 carries for 117 yards for Gibbs, as well as a touchdown on the day. You talk about the passing attack, like we said, Jared Goff has 303 yards. He spread the ball around perfectly, getting everyone really involved. When you talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8 receptions for 60 yards. Sam Laporta, 6 receptions for 64 yards. Jamison Williams, 5 receptions for 77 yards. Each of those 3 guys also having a touchdown. Jamison also added 1 on the ground as well. And he's continued, speaking of JMO, has continued to really ascend. I really like Jeremy's article the other day, where he talked about JMO finally arriving. And I think we're really starting to see it, in that, like, it's not just the deep ball that we're seeing JMO get involved. Like, it's every aspect of the game, whether it's the rushing attack, whether it's the short game, the mid-range game, and the passing attack, his blocking, all of these things, we are seeing him be a key cog in this offense. And so seeing him being able to elevate his game to this level is amazing. Sam Laporta is finally starting to come on and starting to put together some really consistent performances. I saw a post from the Lions Twitter account today talking about he's the first tight end in NFL history with 600 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns in both of his first 2 seasons. So again, Sam being able to continue that track of being one of the top tight ends in the NFL. And I mean, we know it at this point. When it comes down to Amon-Ra St. Brown, if it's a big game, you can always expect a big performance from him. So a ton of kudos goes out to the offense, as well as the offensive line, again, making a ton of movement in the running game. Outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, I think both Jamar Jefferson and Craig Reynolds both had some meaningful runs in that game, to where it's a lot of credit to that offensive line being able to move bodies out of the way against the defense that Morgan and I pointed to and said, like, hey, they are susceptible in the run. And it was really nice to see the Lions lean on that, especially early, with a lot of those outside runs where Jahmyr Gibbs was able to gash them for some pretty big yardage. You flip things over to the defensive side, and again, things were not as pretty. Obviously, the Lions defense gave up over 400 yards of total offense on the day, but you still got some timely stops, 2 key turnovers from Kirby Joseph. You got a big sack at the end of the game from Brian Branch. Yes, there was a face mask. Hey, not everything gets called. There's holding on every play, and that doesn't always get called. So again, the Lions did get a number of key stops in that second half of the game against the 49ers that really helped propel them forward to be able to get this win. On top of the fact, obviously, the 49ers are dealing with some kicking woes with Jake Moody missing two field goals as well as an extra point. So a really tough day for him. And I think that's the stuff that we talk about when we talk about what separates a good team from a bad team. And Dan Campbell talks about it all the time about playing complementary football. This is what it looks like. Complementary football sometimes means that your offense is going to have to do the heavy lifting. And I know over the last couple weeks, it's been a lot of that. It's been a lot of the Lions offense having to score 30 plus to be able to, make up for some of the defensive woes of this unit. But that's what it means at times to be able to play that big. There was a game against the Titans where the special teams had to carry the load for the offense because they weren't able to really move the ball or really get enough opportunities to get themselves going. So that's sometimes what it's going to look like for this Lions team. But it's another big win for them against a team that bounced them out of the playoffs last year. They were so close to beating that team and getting their first Super Bowl bid. So it was good to be able to see them get their revenge, and especially after seeing them struggle in the first half, to be able to come out in the second half and really give it to the winners. I think we're starting to see if the 49ers can get things right going into next year, this could be another one of those like budding NFC rivalries, because obviously the 49ers have been atop of the NFC for a long time, and clearly the Lions are starting to ascend up to that position as well. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about some of the big talking points to come out from this game with the Lions getting that win over the 49ers. And one of the biggest things that I'm seeing so many people ask, whether it's, the national sports analysts or even some Lions fans are, can this offense continue to carry the load for this defense? Like, is that an actual sustainable way of winning games, especially as you're starting to go into the postseason? And I think we should all take a step back and realize that this offense isn't just like getting just like fluky like success, right? Like, this is actual dominance that we're seeing on the behalf of Ben Johnson, Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, the list goes on and on. Like, this is dominance we're seeing. This isn't fluky stuff. Like, this is a team that has gone out there week in and week out. And the teams that aren't prepared, the teams that don't necessarily match up well, those are the teams that the Lions hang 40 on. Those are the teams that they are going out and blowing the doors off of from the jump. And I think as you get into the playoffs, yes, things get more highly contested. Things become like more meaningful in those moments, and players have to rise to a different occasion, and everyone starts to lock in because they really realize in those moments it's win or go home. But at the same time, isn't that how this Lions team always plays? Like, doesn't it always feel like they're playing with that type of chip on their shoulder that if they don't make a play on this down, or if they don't make enough plays in this game, that they're not going to, get to where they want to get to, or that if they don't make enough plays, that it's going to, have this trickle down effect of them not being able to convert the next week. This team plays as if it's their last. And I think, again, going back to that 49ers game, that's exactly what we saw with Dan Campbell trotting out his starters, is like, no, we are still going to compete. We are still out here to win football games. And so when it comes down to like, can this team do it? I think we have to first and foremost realize that like, it's not like anyone has really challenged them. Like, they've been able to do it because of how they execute. Ben Johnson is a mastermind when it comes down to play calling and devising an offensive game plan. And then he has the players at his disposal that are executing at a high level, whether it's the regular plays or the trick plays. This team is going out there and imposing their will. They lose David Montgomery. Yes, that's unfortunate. Guess what? They still go out there and they're putting up 100 yards rushing. They lose JMO for 2 games. Guess what? They still go out there and they have a dominant passing attack. They have to shuffle a couple of offensive linemen because someone's banged up. They still find ways of keeping their quarterback upright or continuing to be productive in the run game. The list goes on and on. Like, this is not fluky stuff that we're seeing by this offense. This offense has proven that they can do it regardless of the opponent and regardless of how their defense is playing. I fully believe, and I'm not saying that this is being said in the building, but I almost kind of feel like every offensive player on this roster at this point goes into every game feeling like they should put up 40, that they should be putting up over 30 points against the opposing team, because that's just how well prepared they are. That's how talented this roster is. So I don't know. So I don't think the question of can they do it is the right question. I think the better question is, what's the defense that you're looking at going forward that you're like, that's the defense that's probably going to give them an issue. Even this week going up against Minnesota, and I'm not going to talk too much about Minnesota today, but you look at a team like Minnesota, they were and are a highly ranked defense in the NFL right now. Go back to what that game looked like in week 6 when both of these teams were once again tied with the same record at 5-1, and the Lions got out to a 21-10 lead at halftime, right? And ended up winning that game 31-29, but they were able to move the ball against Minnesota. As talented as that defense is, they were still having their issues with this Lions offense. So I don't think it's a matter of if, it's a matter of who do you think can stop them. And I think Philly is the one team that I look at where I'm like, hey, the Lions are going to definitely need this defense to wake up at some point. They're definitely going to need to be able to get some pieces back. They're definitely going to figure some things out schematically, because once, if you are able to get to a matchup with Philly, you're going to be in for a really tough day that afternoon. But we have a lot of football still left between now and then. Right now it's Minnesota, and then we have the rest of the playoffs, and we'll see if we ever end up having to see a team like Philadelphia in the playoffs. And I know for some people that may not seem fair, right? Like, why are we putting so much pressure on the offense? Shouldn't we be just expecting Aaron Glenn and this defense to step up more? And the answer is yes. Like, I'm not by any means saying that Aaron Glenn and this defense can continue to phone it in. Not that I believe that they've been phoning it in. I just think that they're obviously shorthanded. I don't think anyone on this team is mailing in effort. But at some point in time, yes, this defense has to stand up and they have to make more plays. This past week, we saw Kirby Joseph do it with 2 interceptions. Next week, it may need to be Brian Branch. It may need to be someone like Jack Campbell, Ifeatu Melifonwu, Levi Onwuzurike, DJ Reader, Zadarius Smith. Like, who knows? Yes, everybody on this defense is going to have to elevate their play as these games start to mean more and more. And again, it starts with this week against Minnesota, but I also don't think that the same expectation is placed on this defense as it is on this offense. Like, I think we look at this offense, like I said a little while ago, and it wouldn't shock me if most of those players on that offense think that, yeah, we can go in here and hang 40 on anyone. I think this defense, your mindset should probably be the opposite. We can't let anyone score 40. We can't let that type of stuff happen. And we heard Dan Campbell say it, I believe it was like last week or 2 weeks ago on 97.1 The Ticket, when he was talking about, like, listen, if this defense gives up 400 yards of offense, if they give up 700 yards of offense or whatever, but they win, he's going to be happy. And I think that's where we as a fan base, like as Lions fans, I think that's the mentality we need to take on, is that this defense may not look like the 2000 Ravens, right? They may not look like those dominant defenses of old, but as long as they're doing enough to allow the offense to, get out to a lead, and as long as they're able to get stops here and there, that's the thing that we should be able to hang our hat on. And again, that's not to say that that's easy, and that's not to give the defense a pass, but I think it's also realizing where we are with this current roster and where we are with players on the IR and things of that nature. Hopefully, yes, eventually you will get guys back. Hopefully you get Alex Anzalone back. Hopefully you're able to get someone like Carlton Davis back, and so that things start to look a little more normal. But until then, yes, this defense is basically bend, but hopefully don't snap in two. And while that might not give a lot of people enough courage or enough belief that this team can make a deep run into the playoffs, the next thing I want to talk about, I at least hope does. Because when we talk about, like, hey, can the Lions do this? Or what if, are the other Lions able to rise to the occasion and things of that nature? I actually feel like for the first time ever as a Lions fan, my answer to those questions are yes. Right? And it almost feels silly when I hear people ask it, like, well, do you think the Lions can rise to the occasion? Do you think the Lions can overcome this? Do you think the Lions, are going to be able to overcome this hurdle? And my answer has been a resounding yes. And it's because of one person and one person alone, and that's Dan Campbell. Dan has been able to instill, not just in this football team, but I think into a number of fans in this state and across this country, that the Lions are able to do and overcome just about anything because of the way that they prepare, because of the way that they look at every single challenge. That is something that I am not worried about when it talks about going into Minnesota this week. I'm not worried about Dan's having this team ready. Did you see him in that press conference where he's talking about this is as good as it gets? And it reminds me back, I can't remember which game it was specifically last year, where it was like, I think it might have been either Bears or Vikings, but it was a very similar situation where it's like, hey, we have one drive. It's the end of the game. It's like, a minute left in the game. This is as good as it gets. And he was excited about the moment, and his team was prepared, and they went out and they executed and they got the win. That is how I feel going into this game against Minnesota. That is how I feel going into the postseason, is that Dan's looking at his team. He's not blind. He's not naive to think that, like, oh, we have the best defense in the NFL. But I think he's he has enough belief in his team and how they prepare and how, his coaches coach and keeps everyone accountable, that he believes that, like, listen, we'll go in there with our best guys, with our best game plan, and we're going to execute. And as long as they continue to do that at a high enough clip, they will win games. They will overcome whatever hurdle is placed in front of them. And like I said, it's something that for me it's a first as a Lions fan, because I do remember the days when we would ask those questions of like, well, hey, the Lions have an opportunity to do X, Y, and Z. Is the moment too big? And I think under Dan's watch, there has yet to be a moment where he's been the head coach where I felt like the moment was too big. It doesn't feel like this man blinks when it comes down to these high tense situations. Mike Tomlin has like the line for the Steelers where it's like, you should cut off your eyelids so that you don't blink in those situations. I don't think Dan Campbell was ever born with him, with the way he acts and the way he approaches some of these high pressure situations. So it's not something statistical. It's not something that I can point to a specific player or something like that to say like, hey, this is why I think this team will be able to overcome their defensive woes. But it is a person in terms of the coach, and you look at how he's prepared this team from the time he's gotten there. It's one of the things that I love the most about Dan, because again, every head coach for the most part can win the press conference. Dan is one of the few coaches that I can think of in recent memories, especially a Lions coach, that has come in and done exactly what he said. He has built the exact type of team. Him, Brad Holmes, Sheila Hamp, they have built the type of organization that they envisioned. And so when you're going into these situations, and again, they may not be sexy, they may not be blowouts, it may not be the type of dominance that you want to see, but I think there should be enough belief, at least again, from the fan base. I don't expect people outside of this fan base that don't get to follow this team as closely to get this. But for those of us that have been following this team religiously, we should know, yeah, things are different. This team doesn't shrink in the moments. You put Jared Goff outdoors in cold weather, guess what? He's going to perform. You put him in high stakes situations, he's going to perform. You put Jamison Williams out there and he's got a deep ball coming his way, he's going to make those types of catches. It's the little things that we have started to believe in with this team. We believe that, at least I do, right? I can't speak for everybody, but I at least believe that somebody on the defense is going to make a play, whether it's Kirby Joseph or Brian Branch or Terrion Arnold's going to get a stop somewhere. There's enough belief that, again, I don't need this team to play perfect for 4 quarters, but I need them to make enough plays. And I think Dan is the guy to continue to keep this team on that course, keep them that prepared so that when it comes down to Minnesota, when it comes down to making a run in the playoffs, we are going to see this team rise to the occasion more often than they won't. But again, those are just some of my thoughts on the matter. Again, I would love to hear what you guys think in the comment section below. Like always, if you are looking for more additional Lions content, you can go over to prideofdetroit.com. There are new articles being uploaded over there all the time. And last but not least, if you are looking to stay locked into what kind of video content we are making over here on YouTube, all you have to do is hit that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and that's going to make it so easy for you to find our content over here on YouTube. But with all that said, I'm Miko. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.